So hey there, a little quick recap here on the three G's as they relate into the late 19th century imperialism, and then, we'll take a look at the fourth G as well. Here we go. So we have already talked about the three G's as they relate to this new era of imperialism. Remember God, gold, and glory? The three G's here, the big thing I want to emphasize on this point is that while there is consistency in these really broad terms that we're using to describe the three G's, that there is a subtle change that's gone on. So this is really same in the category, but really nothing else is the same. The gold is now just the economic motivations to try to make your corporations more profitable in a capitalistic sense. The glory for your country is now a glory for your nation through the nationalist movements that are taking place that are being manipulated by politicians like Bismarck as well as members of British Parliament. And then the God of religious cultural motivation is now more of a broad scale cultural motivation that is spread to just the general acceptance by Europeans that their culture is just better than the rest of the world. But I think you know, and I hope you remember that there is a fourth G to be considered. So that fourth G is, of course, technology. And the College Board for us, they have laid out a couple of different categories that we can put this technology into. In the area of weaponry, this is where industrial warfare is going to be more and more of a thing. There's an evolution that has taken place on the weaponry and the killing power of the firearms that are being used. Things have evolved from a musket from the Revolutionary War days or the Napoleonic War days to the development of the mini ball, which is going to be a more accurate projectile coming from these front loading rifles. Because a musket ball, which was just a ball of lead, you could get an accurate shot 20, maybe 30 yards away. But with these kind of more streamlined projectile bullets, called a mini ball, even though it's not a ball, you kind of increase your accuracy and be accurate for 100 to 150 yards. And then by the time you get to the 1880s or so, the weapon of choice is now a breech loading rifle. Instead of having to pour powder down the barrel of the gun and then the packing and then the loading the mini ball from the front, you can now load from the rear of the weapon, from the breech of the weapon, these pre-made cartridges that have got a blasting cap on them so you don't have to pour powder or anything. The big deal on this is you go from a 2 to 3 minute reload on weaponry like this to this one being able to reload and fire the next shot within a matter of just a few seconds. And so combine that with the greater range, and this is much more efficient at defeating your enemy. Take this to the 1890s, to the turn of the 20th century, and you get the Maxim machine gun, one of the early versions of it here, where it's not breech loading, but you're feeding a battery of weapons coming through, where instead of it's a machine gun, right? So instead of it being one shot every 3 to 5 seconds, like the breech loading rifle, now it's multiple shots in each second. And so this is going to increase the ability of European armies, to be better at conquering people, which is going to be heavily weighed into what happens on, Asian and particularly African imperialism. A second big category of this is within communications and transportation. Some of this we've already seen back in Unit 6 with the development of the telegraph to the telephone to the wireless radio. But where this has an impact in imperialism is wireless radio is going to allow you to have ship-to-shore communication on a consistent basis. Improved communication means improved merchant movement, but also improved naval movement to make sure that your gunships can get where you need them to be on a more consistent basis. So that transportation is going to increase the level of military control that the European imperialists will be able to impose on other parts of the world. In transportation, the big example here is the steamship. So it's like in terms of technology as it impacts like this exploration imperialism end of it. When we did this back in the fall semester, I was like, think of a sailboat in your mind, and there's that triangular sail like a lateen sail. The kind of thing we're talking about here with steamships, though, you should be thinking about the Titanic. These huge ships that aren't just like cruise ships, but they are freight ships. They are Navy ships that are going to transport soldiers and weapons and goods to all these new places, and it is going to allow there to be greater European control on a global scale. When we talked about this back in the Unit 1 version of interaction with the rest of the world, disease was an issue. But now we've seen some developments in terms of medicine and Pasteur's germ theory to the point they're figuring out like where medicines come from, or sorry, where disease comes from through microbes, germs, bacteria, virus, all this kind of stuff. So the knowledge about how to approach disease spreading is going to influence how they will treat diseases that are like more endemic in other parts of the world. Malaria is a huge problem particularly for Europeans that are going into the African continent. And so this is something to try to work through as a way to, well, survive and prosper in those neo-Europes that they're trying to establish. When it comes down to medical care, the idea of like using anesthesia to put somebody to sleep while they are having surgery as opposed to them being awake and going into shock during surgery, that's a big thing. And then for antiseptic, we're talking like antiseptic washes for surgical tools, chemical washes that are going to kill the bacteria on surgical tools, so you're not just kind of like wiping it off or rinsing it off in water as you go from surgery on one person to another person. These are major steps forward, which we all kind of take for granted these days, but this is like the 1870s, 1880s, 1890s that are making this happen, all as part of what in Europe was the public health movements, figuring out how stale, stagnant water leads to bacterial growth that makes people sick. Well, this type of awareness about where disease comes from is going to help prevent the spread of disease as European explorers go into new regions in different parts of the world. Specific example in this is the development of quinine or quinine, if you're British is how you would say this. This is an extract that's actually taken from the bark of juniper trees. And these juniper trees, they are, well, maybe it's more to it than just the juniper tree. It's like this extract, it is used as a malarial treatment. It's like an anti-malaria drug. This stuff is potent. It is kind of like, nasty tasting, but it helps Europeans survive if they happen to contract malaria while they are in these other parts of the world. All of this, combining this with the nationalism and the capitalism and the glorification of European culture, all of this is kind of tying together to make this imperialist movement in the late 19th century seem like it's the normal, natural thing for Europeans to do. So now all we need to do is take a specific look at the parts of the world where this is happening.